I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
The deep state's strategy to force President Trump out of the White House is nothing new. It has been done before. Few presidents have ever had to contend with entrenched deep state operatives immediately after taking office. President Nixon and President Trump both have. It only makes sense for the deep state to continue using best practices for unseating President Trump. Their most successful coup was against Richard Nixon. President Nixon was uniquely unsuited for the presidency. This is surprising given his decades of experience at the highest levels of the American government. He had an imperial view of the presidency. He believed he could govern by decree. When this proved impossible, he was not above using unethical behavior to achieve his goals. Immediately after taking office on January 20th, 1969, entrenched deep state operatives began leaking anything damaging to the Nixon administration.
We began the administration with massive hemorrhaging of the most sensitive information from day one, the first National Security Council meeting, in which we laid out our strategy with the Soviet Union. Was leaked to the New York Times within 24 hours of the meeting. It got so that we were delivering the summaries of what was decided only to the principals themselves.
Even if the leaks had to do with actions taken by the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, they were ultimately damaging to Nixon's ability to govern. Sound familiar? They were doing this in the hopes of driving Nixon to violate the law in his quest to retain control of the U.S. government. What finally drove Nixon over the edge was the release of the Pentagon Papers. The following tape is a recording of Alexander Haig notifying President Nixon of the leak of damaging secret Pentagon documents, primarily dealing with Nixon's two predecessors.
Nothing else of interest in the world?
Yes, sir. Very significant, this goddamn New York Times expose of the most highly classified documents of the war.
Oh, that. I see. I didn't read the story, but you mean that was leaked out of the Pentagon?
Sir, the whole study that was done for McNamara and then carried on after McNamara left by Clifford and the peaceniks over there. This is a devastating security breach of the greatest magnitude of anything I've ever seen.
Well, what's being done about it then? I mean, I didn't. Did we know this was coming out?
No, we did not, sir.
Yeah.
There are just a few copies of this.
But what about the
volume report?
But what about the? Let me ask you this though. What about Laird? What's he going to do about it? Now I just start right at the top and fire some people.
Nixon was always prepared to break the law to achieve his objectives, but the leak of the Pentagon Papers sent Nixon on a path that would lead to his humiliating resignation. Even J. Edgar Hoover, the Dark Lord of the deep state and a master of hypocrisy, warned Nixon not to fall for the deep state trap being prepared for him.
One thing I was going to ask you, a lot of people have a feeling that I ought to. Not a lot. They're all mixed, as a matter of fact. Some people think that now that this court has acted, that I ought to make a statement about the freedom of the press and that we are trying to censor them and so forth. My inclination, whatever is word, is not to say so. I'll tell you.
I think you're right.
I kind of think I should stay out. But what's your public relations judgment on it, Edgar? I'd just like to know.
Public relations judgment, Mr. President, is that you should remain absolutely silent about it.
You would, huh?
I would.
But now you don't think that that's any great problem that they've been that naturally they've been charging that we have been trying to keep the press from printing the truth about the war and so forth.
I don't think that's involved because, as a matter of fact, these papers don't harm you one bit.
No, actually, the stories in the Post and Times this morning were all about Kennedy and DM.
Kennedy, he was the one who started it, and then Lyndon Johnson escalated it, and then you inherited it, and you have brought it down. You never sent an additional man in there, but you brought it down.
Yeah.
And I think what they're trying to do is to bait you into taking a position that the freedom of the press ought not be to that extent. And I think we ought to be awful careful what we do in this case of this man Ellsberg, because there again they're going to make a martyr out of him. All of the press of the country are going to come to the front in, that he's a martyr, and when you view what the Supreme Court has now said, I doubt whether we're going to be able to get a conviction of him. I hope so, but I doubt it. We've got a good, strong case on him, and his first wife testified very vigorously against him. And it's a good, strong case, but I think from your point of view, it would be very ill-advised.
You don't think I should say anything?
I don't think you should say anything.
Just let it cool off. Let the papers come out and let them reflect on whoever they reflect.
Print what they want to print. It doesn't reflect upon you. You had nothing to do with all of this.
I had nothing. Nothing of it was about me, you know.
Not at all. And therefore, if you enter it now on the grounds of freedom of the press or anything of that, then it's the very thing that the enemies of the administration want to do, is to divert the attack upon you, and not upon Kennedy and not upon Johnson. Now, of course, I think what's going to happen, I think Lyndon Johnson will ultimately burst forth himself. They're trying to bait you into taking the position. This fellow Stanton, who's now going to be cited by the Congress for contempt of court, he shot his mouth off today, and I think the House of Representatives will cite him for contempt. He ought to be cited for contempt. But let that be his battle, not yours.
Ultimately, Nixon fell for the deep state bait, which culminated in the Watergate break-in and Nixon's eventual disgraceful exit from American politics. I am not suggesting President Trump has a similar personality as the deeply troubled President Nixon. However, one cannot help but see the similarities between the deeply divisive 1960s and where America now finds itself. This is exactly the type of conditions the deep state thrives on. Now, the deep state is trying this act once again. If Trump falls for it and breaks the law, even in a minor way, the deep state will destroy his administration, and America will be returned to the globalist orbit.